Today, we welcome on Ethan Cadeaux, NBC Sports Washington writer. He writes mostly about the Redskins and Nationals. He's put out a lot of recent good tweets and good articles. I've read a couple of them. They've been really interesting, especially the one on Dan Snyders that just came out. They've been really good. How are we doing today, Ethan?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you guys for having me on. This is like full circle for me because we all grew up together, and now we're operating in a professional scene. So happy to be on.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Been a long time since all the baseball days together.
Oh yeah, big fifth grade championship with the Yankees. Those good old days for sure.
Yeah, good old days.
Yeah. So getting into it, we know why you're here. You got the insight in on the Redskins. You're close to it. You get to see all the stuff. Couldn't think of a better time to bring you on. I would just say just go ahead and give a rundown of what it's been like the last couple of weeks with everything coming out, what you know and what you've heard.
So the last 2 weeks have probably been two of the most hectic weeks I've had at work since I started working there in 2018. So as I was explaining, in June was horrible. There was nothing to talk about. There'd been no sports for 3 months, and it was just hypothetical after hypothetical after hypothetical. But then on July, I think it was July 1st or July 2nd, FedEx's CEO, Fred Smith, called for Washington to change its name from the Redskins. And at the time, I didn't even know that Fred Smith was a minority owner of the team. I just thought FedEx Field, I know they have like the 20-plus year naming rights deal that expires in like a couple years, but I had no idea he was a minority owner. And then pressure came from other corporate sponsors, Nike, Pepsi, etc. And then July 3rd was the first bombshell when the league announced that, or not the league, the team announced that they were going to be going through the investigation of changing their name eventually. And then 2 weeks later, almost, I think it was July 13th, July 11th, something like that, was when they announced that they were going to retire the Redskins and the logo. So those 10-ish days, we were writing blogs about the Red Wolves, the Warriors, the Red Tails, talking to former players. I talked to Fred Smoot and Brian Mitchell, Doc Walker, and we all talked to a bunch of people, and we were working around the clock, putting out dozens of articles a day. And then this even got crazier, as you guys all know, last week when the Washington Post dropped that story about the culture and the sexual harassment claims within Washington's front office. So for the past 2 weeks, we were talking about all this name change. Then there was that 4 or 5 days of the lead up of, the Washington Post is dropping this bombshell, but we don't know what it's going to be about. And then now it's the aftermath of everything that they've dropped. So, I mean, I think it's a little quieter now than definitely a little quieter now than it was 3 to 4 days ago, but it's been one hectic month for sure.
So when news dropped and we all saw that week leading up to everything that was supposed to come out, the news, there's going to be this huge story. All these allegations or supposed things were coming out, and like the sex parties with the cheerleaders in foreign countries, the Capri Bib story, all the stuff, the paying off the refs. Yeah, the Epstein one was huge. And then did you feel a little let down? Like the media really built this up, and then it came out, and it really wasn't anything bigger than what Mark Cuban went through a couple years ago? Or
I wouldn't say I was let down, because I would say saying that I was let down by the story is discrediting what actually came out and the courage that it took the 15 women or so to speak on what's going on in Redskins Park, or in Ashburn, I guess. In terms of the hype that it got entering the week, a lot of it was unprecedented by a lot of people that didn't know what was going on behind the scenes at the Post. If you looked at the Twitter accounts of people who worked at the Washington Post leading up, none of them were the ones teasing the story.
That's a good point.
It was all other members, and it wasn't even only the media. It was just a bunch of people on Redskins Twitter just running wild with rumors and stuff. And I'm sure some of the other stuff that came out is true, and there's probably a lot of stuff that came out that wasn't in the Post story that is also true. But I would say I wasn't let down. I was just surprised that maybe more wasn't included. But like I said, let down would be the wrong word for me to use.
Yeah, no, let down is definitely the wrong word to use. But I just couldn't find out.
No, you're
what
good.
I was trying to say with the media.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate the internet when it comes down to it because it was supposed to be this. All the Redskins fans were finally going to get what they wanted, and this just makes me hate the fucking internet more because we were all going to get Dan Snyder out of the fucking job. Everyone wanted one thing: Dan Snyder, find a way to fuck this up and give this franchise to Jeff Bezos. Now, saying Jeff Bezos' name leads me to the next question I wanted to ask, which was, I'm one of the people that believe this conspiracy that Bezos wants the team. It's known that he wants the team, but it's not a coincidence that he buys the Washington, or he owns the Washington Post. And now, as the Redskins are going through this turmoil with the name change, all of a sudden this story comes down. What do you? Any thought to that? Or
I personally don't know if he's interested or not in buying the team, but like you said, you're not the only one who believes in this conspiracy. There's a lot of others, and a lot of people believe in the conspiracy because it's realistic. I mean, he has the money. He's one of the few people that could purchase the team should it go up for sale. And like you said, he has a connection to the city's most powerful media outlet. Yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't say it was a Jeff Bezos motive to go investigate and try and like embarrass Dan Snyder to try and get him out. I wouldn't say that was his motive, but I would say, yeah, I mean, there might be something there. I mean, only a few people know. I don't think you're wrong to say there could be something there.
Do you think the push to change the name was kind of linked to the building of this story? Was that all kind of culminated? Do you think that made an impact on Fred Smith and the initial sponsors beginning to pull out? Like, do you think they kind of heard about the building of this story at that time, and that the two things are kind of linked together a little bit?
I'd say this, like, that story took months and months of investigative work and reporting. So they had to know that maybe Fred Smith didn't know, but I'm sure the team knew before the story came out, which in fact they did because the Post reached out to ask for comments and all that stuff from team officials and such. But I would say the name change is more directly correlated to what we're going through as a country and all the events that have happened, honestly, post the killing of George Floyd. I mean, ever since then, there's been this huge, like, social justice reform, obviously, in this country. And I think that led to the pressure from sponsors, because it wasn't just Fred Smith. It was like Pepsi, Bank of America,
Nike,
and all these other corporates.
Their stuff and everything.
I think the biggest part about this is Snyder was never going to change the name, in my opinion, unless, like, he never wanted to. He said he didn't want to change the name. But once he realized that financially, like, his biggest sponsorships were going to go if he didn't change the name, I feel like he's kind of left with no choice. So I would say that is much more of a reason than this Post story. I wouldn't say it's coincidental that they both came out at the same time, but I would say it's definitely not the best look for the people in Ashburn.
For sure.
Have you heard anything in terms of the name change? I know there's a big push on social media that everyone wants the Red Wolves, but I think Dan Snyder's going to do the opposite of what everyone wants, like he usually does.
So the only thing I know is when I talked to Fred Smoot, like right when it was like July 5th, because it was the day after July 4th, and he told me that was the same day he like started the whole Red Wolves thing, or told me about the Red Wolves. He also said the team had 2 or 3 names they really liked, and if you think about the time that he said that, this Red Wolves movement was not even like a thing. It really is taken off within like the last couple weeks and post that interview. So I would say, I don't think Red Wolves is going to be the new name. I would say maybe like a 10% chance, but I personally have no insight on when or what it's going to be. I think the team wants it to or have a new name before the season. I know Ron Rivera said that as well, but there's a lot of legal implications that go into that could definitely postpone that process.
The motherfucker who bought the trademarks might be the smartest dude you'll ever see in the world. I mean, that dude's fucking genius.
He came out saying he doesn't even want anything. He's willing to give them. He's willing to give them the name.
And he said especially the Red Wolves too, which I found interesting.
Did someone have a gun to his head when he said that?
Yeah, I mean that dude won't have to work another day in his life if he gets paid for it. He'll get paid more than he's ever been paid in his life.
But as we move to the fall, do you think there's obviously I know the general consensus is that Snyder's gonna still be the owner of the Redskins on week 1. Is there a path? Like, what would have to happen for him to be pushed to sell the team? And do you think it's likely at this point?
I think he would have to do something Donald Sterling-esque in order to sell the team. I think it's very, very, very difficult to get, or for any league to oust an owner unless there's direct like the owner did something direct. Like,
just because
while
of the nature
this all happened under his watch, he was not accused directly of the sexual harassment. So, I mean, you could definitely argue, and I wouldn't disagree with you that it's just as bad that happened under his watch as him doing it himself. But the fact that he didn't do it himself makes it very difficult, in my opinion, for him to leave. Or because so it's hard to force anyone to sell.
Yeah.
Like you see the same thing in New York with Dolan.
Especially if you're an owner of an NFL team. I would never sell either. It's just a cash cow.
Yeah, and especially Washington is one of the most valuable franchises in the league still. It's remarkable how they've been so bad yet are still so valuable.
And you're selling low right now just because of the pandemic. I'm sure franchise valuations will be temporarily impacted just in the short term.
Yeah, and we saw a couple years ago what the Panthers went for. I can only imagine how much money Washington would go for if Snyder wanted to sell, which I highly doubt he does.
With speaking of the Panthers, and with Ron Rivera kind of making his way to the Redskins, how much influence do you think he has right now? We've kind of debated on the show how much power, how much say he has on personnel decisions in addition to the coaching. How much impact do you think he's had on the culture, and how much power does he have with personnel decisions right now?
So I would say right now in Redskins Park, Dan Snyder's the most important person in that building, and Ron Rivera is number 2. And I think the gap between Rivera and anybody else is very significant too. Especially with everything he's done within, he hasn't even coached a game yet, a practice, but he's already the voice of the organization. He's the one coming out and having to make quotes about everything that comes out. And it's never anyone else. It's him. So I would say, in my opinion, I already think he has the most say that any head coach has had in Washington since Joe Gibbs. And that's without coaching a game, a practice, anything. And that just shows the trust that Snyder has in Ron and where he envisions the team going. I personally think that when Snyder hired Rivera, he wants him to be the head coach for as long as it works out. And I think he wants Rivera to have some role within the organization for longer than just being the head coach.
Wow.
I mean, it makes sense with all the power that he's been given.
Yeah, it does. It does make sense from optically what we've been seeing, just how present he's been in press conferences and just influential. You see the reports and stuff. So that's very significant for them.
One article that you wrote that really, sorry to cut you off, but one article that you wrote that really stood out to me was the title was, "Will Dan Snyder try to parlay the name change into building a stadium in DC bigger and better than Jerry's World in Dallas?" That was a really interesting article. I just wanted to ask, where'd you get your information for, or was that just pure opinion?
So that story was actually aggregated off a podcast that Vinny Serrato, who was the Redskins GM from 2001 to 2009 and had another stint with the team, he told that to Golick and Wingo on their podcast. And basically what he said, I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the quotes in front of me, but he was the first time we got to Jerry World, we had dinner on a Friday night before a Sunday night game. It was my family, the Snyders, and the whole Jones family. And as they were getting the tour of the stadium, Snyder looked at me and said, "I'm going to have one bigger and better." So that's where that came from. And the whole idea is, so Snyder's been the Redskins organization as a whole has been talking about wanting to build a new stadium for years now. I mean, you guys have all been to FedEx Field. You know what it looks like. You know,
it's a dump.
Without saying anything more, you know it's definitely not a venue you want to clamor about. So the issue with the new stadium has always been where to build it. And in Washington, D.C., that would be the number one ideal place to do it. But the only land site they could currently build it on is where the old RFK Stadium is. It's the only place that's big enough to host a professional football stadium to build it to the demands that the team wants. And earlier this year, we heard the mayor, Muriel Bowser, say the team will not build a new stadium in D.C. until it changes the name. So I think if you're thinking about where the organization is as a whole, they've completely, just besides the name change, this offseason has been a complete rebrand in general. They got a new head coach. They wiped Bruce Allen, and they wiped the longtime trainer. They just got rid of all these other people that were accused of harassment. Yet they got the number 2 overall pick in the draft, Chase Young. They have a young quarterback. They have a young core in general. I mean, most of the players you talk about on the Redskins are 26 and younger.
Yeah.
So this might, the whole purpose behind that is there's really no better time to really rebrand the whole organization now. And ultimately, I think most Washington fans want the new stadium to be in D.C. So I think Snyder realized the only way I can make all this happen and please the majority of people is if I want to build that new stadium in D.C., I have to take the first step in getting rid of the name. So that's where that comes from.
Do you think he would have taken this step eventually if it wasn't basically forced upon him?
I think a name change was inevitable. I mean, especially as we're going as a society, for better or worse, I think that realistically, if it didn't happen this year, it was only a matter of time. So, I mean, hypothetically, say it hadn't happened until 2024, 2025, that's when the stadium lease ends, or the lease ends in 2027 or something like that. But you get to the point where you have to build a new stadium because you don't want to play in FedEx Field any more games than you're legally required to do upon this agreement.
You just don't want to play in Landover anymore.
That's a huge point. I think Mayor Bowser's statement was the nail in the coffin, where you just knew inevitably if they wanted to go to D.C., they got to change the name. And you just see how successful Nats Park has been in revitalizing Southeast, and you just know if they do build a stadium in RFK, it would be great. I think it'd be great for the fan base, and
definitely
kind of like we said, I think it's a volatile time for the Redskins, but it could eventually be a good thing because they've been consistently bad for so long, where maybe the volatility might restructure some things in the long run, even if this is kind of like a rock bottom more than just more of the same.
Yeah, and think about it, how old are you? 20 or 21, right? And you have never seen the Redskins be good. I've never seen the Redskins be good.
We were just talking about this earlier.
They people say they haven't been good for 2 decades. It's been 3. They have not been good since 1991, which is 29 years ago. So as the younger generation, I don't think people even they don't care what the name is as long as the team wins. Winning cures everything in almost any walk of sport and walk of life, honestly. And I would as a Washington fan of any sport, I would not care what the team name is if they're winning. So I think any Redskins fan should definitely take the trade-off of getting rid of the name if it translates into a better culture moving forward.
Well, I think that's a big if under Dan Snyder. I mean, the teams run his way. I can't see a future where they're successful. Have you noticed a change under Ron Rivera? Do you think we're going towards the right direction?
It feels different. I will say that. It's hard to predict success, especially with this team when there's still, 1, so many holes on the roster in general, but 2, like I just said, if they haven't been good in close to 30 years. I mean, they've won 1 playoff game, maybe 2 playoff games in my lifetime. They've been to the playoffs 4 times in my lifetime. I mean, there's, like you said, it starts at the top. And like, if they haven't been good for that long, there's no reason for anyone to believe that the change is coming now. But I will say Rivera, since he's gotten here, his presence does feel different than a lot of the past head coaches. He's way more well respected than everyone that's been here in the past. He's shown more accountability. He's willing to take blame for things, which is what we've seen coaches not do here in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if anyone is going to be the person to turn it around, it has to be him.
Yeah.
What's your impression of Jay Gruden? Just what was your impression while he was there, and now that you're kind of seeing some of the different rumors and some of the quotes that have come out from DJ Swearinger and of course Zach Brown's Instagram story, and what's your kind of impression of him now and the job he did as Redskins head coach?
So I always liked Gruden a little more than I think the casual person did. I only really covered him the last 2 years he was there. So I don't really have a good overall view of like his 6 years as looking at it objectively. I would say a lot of the players did like him. He was definitely a player's coach. Practices weren't hard. They played music. They were casual. But then you have guys like DJ Swearinger, Jonathan Allen, who they just hate that. They want to be pushed in practice. They don't want any nonsense, no BS, no effing around. Like, it's football. It's our job. Like, we can F around when we win. And ultimately, they didn't win. Gruden won 0 playoff games when he was here. Went to the playoffs twice. I mean, when you look back on Jay Gruden's 6 years in Washington, the only thing that stands out to me was when he decided to bench RG3 for Cousins in the 2015 preseason, and that ultimately led to like them winning the division that year, surprisingly. Other than that, it's a bunch of like 2016, they were supposed to be good. They choked in week 17 against the Giants and missed the playoffs. 2017, 7-9. Not being able to lock up Cousins was huge for the downfall of this organization. And then once Alex Smith got hurt, it was all really downhill from there. I think Jay Gruden finished losing 16 of his last 18 games or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And I think crazy. Do you think him being opposed to Haskins there at the end and kind of them not having a good relationship was the final straw?
I would say just like the timelines didn't match up. I mean, going into 2019, like Gruden knew he had to win. He said as much in like offseason press conferences. He's like, if we don't make the playoffs, I'm not going to be here. So I can understand him being upset by the team drafting a quarterback in the first round who's not necessarily ready to play in week 1. That doesn't help Gruden's future as a head coach now when he's trying to win. I think overall, I mean, once Alex Smith got hurt, like you have no long-term plan or short-term plan at the quarterback position moving forward. And I think the Haskins pick excited a lot of people at the time, a lot of fans, and he's a local guy, DMV guy, balled out his 1 year as a starter. So I think it was exciting for a lot of people, and I personally still think he can be really good. So, like, we'll see. I mean, that, like you said, I definitely think it was the nail in the coffin in terms of the two sides just didn't really, like, agree on a lot of things.
So I have 2 final questions. I know you got to get back to work. We'll wrap it up here soon. One staying on the Redskins topic is, did you hear any of these murmurs of all these different allegations, this shit with Jay Gruden while it was happening? Did you hear any of this going on, any blip of it before it came out, or was this just a surprise to everyone?
Are you talking about like the Cabri Bibb stuff and all that?
Well, just everything. I mean, everything that's come out in the last week.
I would say, like, me personally, on the outside, I didn't know much. I remember last year there was a video like 3 days before Gruden got fired that surfaced the internet of him hanging out at like the bars outside Richmond in training camp. Like, pretty sure he was smoking a J, and he was like talking to some like college age like girls. So that I knew was a little fishy. I mean, of course, I've heard some stories from some people that I'm close with, but I mean, like, in terms of the severity of everything going on in Redskins Park, no, I was just as shocked as anyone when it came out.
Wow. And then my last question is, how excited are you for this upcoming Nats season? shifting it a little bit towards baseball. I mean, the 60-game season should be exciting. I know you're a big Nats fan. You cover them as well.
Mm-hmm.
This might be the best thing for baseball. This is going to be a really exciting stretch. And how do you feel about it?
I'm bittersweet. I'm like conflicted, and I think it's bittersweet. The bitter part of me is I wish they actually got to have a season as they still get to be the defending champions, but it's
not the same.
It's not the same. You're not going on the road, and everywhere you go, you have a bullseye on your back. People are trying to get the best out of you. And I just think not having fans in the stands, not being able to have your ring ceremony on opening day, not being able to have really your victory lap, your tour, is really the bitter part for me. And another thing is also just Ryan Zimmerman not being there. He's been the guy through it all, and not being able to completely respect his decision, understand it. Honestly, he probably made the best choice for him and his family. But it stinks as a fan to not be able to see the guy who's really been the face of the franchise besides Strasburg and Harper for when he was there, not get to have the victory lap of the title he spent 14 seasons here trying to win and finally getting.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other side, I am thrilled to have professional American sports back, and baseball is going to be the first one back. I think it starts in 2 days, 3 days.
Thursday.
And I'm just as excited as anyone to see Scherzer and Garrett Cole go at it for probably 7+ innings on Thursday night and watch some good old baseball. So I'm really excited for that. And this is another thing I thought that's really cool about the 60-game season. It stinks that 60 games obviously is not long enough to determine who is the best team. But we were talking about this with our Orioles team the other day. What if Baltimore starts out 15-15? They're in playoff contention going into the second half of the season.
Dude, don't get my hopes up. Just don't get my hopes up.
I mean, especially with the Orioles. I mean, I think it was 88. They started 0-21. They were terrible. Then 1989, they came. I might have the years wrong, but 1989 they were supposed to be awful, and they came out and almost made the playoffs, or did make it with a bad team.
So if you start off hot, the Mets always start off 14-2 and then just collapse in May. But if they start off 14-2 this year, they're probably gonna win the NL East. So it's just a lot of cool things that you would never really get to see in a full 162 game season.
It's gonna be a sprint the whole time.
Yeah, I think as sports fans, we got to look at the positives and the uniqueness that comes out of the season rather than looking at it in an old traditionalist way that we're inclined to do as, it's not a full season, it's not 162 games.
Mm-hmm.
It really doesn't count, because one of my friends told me this other day, and this kind of resonated with me. These stats still go on the back of these players baseball cards. It still counts. So it's still going to count towards their careers and all that. And you got to look at it from a Dodgers perspective. If they win the World Series and then Mookie Betts walks in free agency, is it worth it? I mean, maybe you win a World Series your first time since 1988. So,
yeah.
And I think the rest, tell me if you agree with me, helps the Nats a little bit just because of how many innings the rotation threw deep into the playoffs. I'll be curious to see how fresh they're going to look. Their starting pitchers will be down the stretch just because of the fact that usually, I remember what happened with the Red Sox off their championship. Their whole rotation was just, their arm was dead. I mean, Chris Sale still, his arm hasn't fully recovered. So I think that's going to be something really interesting to watch too.
I completely agree with you. Seeing Scherzer kind of get hit around by the Phillies a couple days ago was not the most encouraging thing. But
that was a little worrisome.
Like you said, I mean, Corbin, Scherzer, and Strasburg all came on in relief during the postseason. They really only had 6 pitchers they used the final 3-4 weeks of the season. I mean, it was the big 3, Anibal Sanchez, and then Hudson and Doolittle. They did not want to throw anyone else.
And I think they only won 2 playoff games that weren't Scherzer and Strasburg started. And that whole run, which is insane. I mean, just every star they used, everything broke right. It was so incredible. But
and it for me, speaking for me at least, it was the most fun I've ever had as a sports fan.
Just same here, man.
First time you get to see a championship, really, besides the Capitals.
Yeah, I mean, the Capitals run was awesome, but I'm a bigger baseball guy than I'll ever be a hockey guy. So, but one more thing I want to say on the 60-game season, I think the other thing that helps the Nationals is the DH, honestly, because I mean, even without Ryan Zimmerman, like keeping Howie Kendrick's bat in the lineup every day is going to be huge. And Eric Thames, if he's not playing first that day, I mean, like, it sucks that we're not going to see like Scherzer hit because he's actually pretty good at it. But I mean, I would much rather take the trade off for this unique and interesting season.
Yeah,
it would definitely help them.
Well, I have one last thing I want to ask, which is you work with Chris Cooley, right?
I do not. He works for the Redskins like Team Direct broadcast network.
It's at ESPN 980, right?
No,
I think he might be at 980, but I know he directly works for the team as well.
Okay.
I thought I saw some. Was he on? He might have been on your NBC Sports.
Yeah. So like the two sides have a partnership, so there's a lot of crossover. But
all right.
I'm still low enough on the totem pole. I don't get to really get to benefit from all the other crossover.
Well, I was just gonna ask you how far along Chris Cooley is with CTE, but I guess I guess you aren't gonna know that. But I would be interested to see someone that gets to deal with a veteran tight end and the mush brain that they have probably by now. I want to see how far along he is. But we want to thank you for coming on. It's been awesome. It's been really interesting.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for taking time out of your day to come on.
Of course.